So Marcel works in the Netherlands Institute for Vectors, Invasive Plants and Plant Pests. NIVIP is a molecular department. He's the responsible of the molecular virological research. He's also involved in the European Reference Laboratory for virology. And in 2020, he became head of the Diagnostic molecular biology group. And this group is responsible for molecular diagnostics for all plant pests, invasive plants, and also vectors for zoonosis.
Okay.
And today he's going to speak about system approach, which is the first one for today.
Yeah, okay. So I'm just gonna talk a little bit about the method-based system approach we use to stay proficient in our lab, and I hope it can help you as well. So basically it is how to stay proficient across the board. And I'm going to use this board game, checkers, to lead you through the approach. So first, so we work in the NIVIP, so Netherlands Institute for Vectors, Invasive Plants and Plant Health. So you have seen this picture from Westenberg as well yesterday. So we have 7 organism-specific groups, and of those 7, there are only 5 are national reference laboratories and official labs. So basically the 2 in the bottom, like invasive plants and the group working on factors for zoonotic disease, those are the lucky ones because they are not part of the official control regulations. So their accreditation is not mandatory, although they have a lot of organisms under accreditations. So we also have 2 European reference laboratories in the institute. And basically have just 1 molecular biology group. And they're involved in all those organism groups. So they're all also part of the Netherlands reference laboratories, but also in the European reference laboratories. So we're dealing with diagnostics, we're doing research, we have our own collections, nucleic acids collections. So if we go to the molecular biology diagnostics groups, so at the moment we have 144 tests. And those tests are for more than 500 organisms, regulated or not regulated, it really doesn't really matter. And we have about 21 stuff. But mainly it's on the technicians, so we have 9 technicians which are responsible for the diagnostics tests. So basically what you can see here, so we have this board, checkerboard, so on all the squares, you can see your tests. And then on the other side you have all your organisms, which are even more than on there, so they're more than 500. And then you have your staff, which are the checker stones. And you can see we even have tests which we don't have staff for, so the white squares, there's no staff for there, so everyone needs more staff always. But how to stay proficient for all those tests and all those organisms, and even for the staff, how to stay proficient? That's the questions. So this is what in the ISO standard stands. So this 7.7, so it goes about ensuring the validity of research. And basically we use the first red line there. This is like the laboratory shall have a procedure for monitoring the validity of research. So we think there's some flexibility in there. It doesn't say you have to do all those things which are numbered from A to K for every test or for every organism. Yeah? You need a procedure, whatever that is. So we all have so what's in D, so we all, for every test, you have your first line controls, which are mainly done on reference materials, and you can use that as well to show some proficiency for all your tests. Then you have the interlaboratory comparisons, which you can say we call that third line of controls, and testing of blind samples, which we call ourselves the second line of controls. So how to stay proficient? So we do that on a method level. So then we first go to all the PTs, which are organized by the European Reference Laboratories. So then you can see, so you have a couple of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tests. But indeed, you don't have covered all your organisms, you don't have covered all your tests. But if you then look more on a method level, you only see that basically you have almost covered all your methods, but not the 3 ones on the left side. So maybe you have to do a little bit more for those methods to show that you are proficient. So what we actually use is transferable skills. Those are very important. But what we say, so if we are proficient for a particular method, then we are also proficient for all the tests using that method. So if we then look for the molecular methods, we define, in our case, 4 methods. So make them as less as possible, because that helps you. And then groups all your tests for the methods. Yeah, so we have PCR, that includes also PCR RFLP or reverse transcriptase PCRs, real-time PCRs, Plaquemine assays, cybergreen assays, and even if you use LAMP, so we don't have LAMP in our laboratory, but even LAMP you can put on the real-time PCR if you perform them on a real-time PCR. So we have PCR sequencing. That's basically the most tests we have in the laboratory are on PCR sequencing, because they are easy, they are more generic, so you don't use that much of a lot test. And we have now 2 tests for high throughput sequencing. So, and what we do, we make every year, together with the other disciplines, and the other disciplines make this as well for themselves. We make annual assurance plans. So this is the annual assurance plans for 2022. And then we started with the PTs, which are organized by the European Reference Laboratories. And basically, then you see that almost all methods are covered. There's only 1 method is not covered. And so there's also the invasive plants group is not covered. And of course, they want also to have something done for their own accreditation there. Then we look, so what is done, other PTs which are done. So there's a PT on national level was done for Laboratories, and we covered the PCR. And then we have the blind samples. So mostly those blind samples are made by the organism groups themselves. And then we see that we covered everything there. And what we also do for the entomologists, that they can send in, so every entomologist can send in 3 samples on a yearly basis, where they have already done the diagnosis, and then we check them by molecular test if this diagnosis was okay. And that works vice versa, because they give us assurance, but it gives also them assurance. So for blind samples for biology, so that can be, if you do that on HDS, we'll ask other groups if they have nice samples, which we can analyze, where they found some nice viruses, but it can be sometimes embarrassing for the other group, because they do that with mostly with some other tests, and then we find those viruses. Sometimes we also find other viruses which they don't detect it, so it can be sometimes embarrassing for them. So then this is for 2022. Of course, we didn't cover all the organisms. Yeah. And basically you assign Altrust staff over this sheet. And basically what you do then, the next year, you make a new plan, use the same methods, use different organisms, and you choose them on risk-based. And then you assign staff on different methods. And basically, so you shuffle your staff and basically repeat it every year. And where possible, we use horizontal assurance, which we mostly do in blind samples. So this is an example for Estonia, where you have blind samples and you can use immunofluorescence, PCR, plating, real-time PCR, PCR sequencing. It's not bioassay, but it's pathogenicity test for bacteriology. And basically you can use then 6 methods and multiple staff, just assured in just one sample set. So just coming to a summary, make use of transferable skills, define methods and group those tests and the test in methods. And each method should be covered by at least a second or third line control. That's what we do. Use horizontal assurance where that is possible. And then basically keep shuffling the organism, the test, but also the staff. So this is almost the same photo as what shows you, but this is the silly photo. And yeah, so keep shuffling them. And I just ran not with a checkerboard, but with the checker flag. So that's my favorite spot, Max Verstappen. So, start the question.
Thank you, Marcel. Other question for Marcel? I had one just to start. You were showing the proficiency by methods, and for different type of organisms. In fact, you don't take into account the type of organism in contrast to what we have seen this morning. Is it only for isolated pests, or is it starting really from the sample?
So the blind samples are mostly from the sample, but it also depends on what the PTs are based on, because sometimes the PTs are only done on DNA or on RNA, sometimes it's done on plant material, but yeah, it's not always the same. No.
Because I was thinking of the presentation of Stefan showing that for the extraction of nematodes, it was so different and the extraction was very important. And how can we say when we test on the molecular part that we are efficient for Globodera or methodology, because we don't see this extraction part in this case.
No, but mostly what we so if a proficiency test is done, for instance on Globodera, it's also on isolation, it's also done on morphology, and it's done on molecular tests.
Okay.
Yeah. So I only showed here, of course, the molecular test, but we also do the other.
Yeah, Maya. That's Maya.
Maybe just to complement what Marcel said, from the point of view of biology, we have on an annual basis also horizontally to have an assurance for the whole diagnosis. So we really start from extraction from a matrix. It can be potato tubers, it can be symptomatic or asymptomatic material. And then we have indeed for the horizontal procedure also second line controls, so the blind samples, where you actually you provide confidence and assurance for all the individual steps in your horizontal in your procedure, your diagnosis. And part of that is also the molecular testing for detection or identification, as Marcel explained.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have just a question concerning the matrix. As a test is the combination of the method with the organism and the matrix. For example, for Shigella, do you send the different matrices for the extraction to the laboratories, or it's just one matrix? Because it's a species with lots of hosts, and the extraction process might be different from one host to the other.
So you mean as European reference laboratory, or?
To to cover the table you showed, you try to cover the methods by
Yeah.
supplying that, for instance, the method, if the extraction is also included.
Yeah, so basically,
Do you test different matrices?
yeah, so this is basically the method base, but also the other organism groups are also involved in this annual plan. So basically every organism group in the institute makes an annual plan, and we extract the molecular methods out of that. So indeed, so if you look at Shella and we do that as blind samples, there will be different matrices, different concentrations in there. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't see any more questions, so I want to thank you, Marcel.
Yeah.
And also to thank all the present speakers of this morning. We had many of them, and thank you very much.